passionate about. And I hope you enjoy tonight's event. Thanks.
Thanks, Selena. So I'm Darcy Higgins of Food Forward. First, I'd just like to offer a welcoming message from Glenn Murray, who's the Member of Provincial Parliament, Minister of Universities, Colleges and Training. Glenn says, "It is with great pleasure that I bring greetings today to the World Food Day Toronto event. This event provides an opportunity for us to learn about some of the local food problems in our neighborhoods and to discuss solutions to creating a more sustainable food system in Toronto. Our government is hard at work with the proposed Local Food Act. The Local Food Act will promote, support, and celebrate local food by bringing increased focus to our continued promotion of Ontario food through Foodland Ontario, Farmers Markets Ontario, and the Ontario Farm Fresh Marketing Association. In addition to helping us strengthen our economy and create more jobs, the Act will allow us to develop goals to the production, processing, distribution, sales, and marketing of Ontario food. In fact, if every Ontario family shifted $10 of their weekly food spending to Ontario food, this would generate $2.4 billion in additional sales, $1.2 billion on indirect economic activity, and create 10,000 jobs. This is an exciting time for our neighborhoods. We're enthusiastic about continuing this very important initiative and collaborating with local organizations such as Food Forward. I thank you for the invitation, for your contributions to Toronto Centre, and I look forward to working with you in the future." So Glenn was unable to make it tonight because of another announcement. And perhaps other issues that have come up in the government. So just briefly, Food Forward is an organization that's existed for about 2.5 years, and we really work to do some connecting of the food movement. So you'll see by the speakers we have tonight, we have a number of different folks that are coming from different perspectives, but are all doing very important work. And we think that work needs to connect, to share stories, to share insights with each other, so we can do that work better together and create a really cohesive food movement, and one that can bring about political change. And so we also do advocacy work, and our advocacy is focused mostly at the local level, but also working with our partners provincially. We're a membership-based organization, so we thrive by our members supporting us and getting involved and doing the work that we're all passionate about. We advocate for change in Toronto, and so we look tonight at how we can strengthen community solutions, government and with business. Business enterprises are making a lot of change in the city. And so thinking about how we can improve this Local Food Act that's just been proposed with some of the discussions that are happening tonight. The Local Food Act is currently focused very specifically on local food, but how do we also think about making that food ethical, thinking about ecologically sustainable, and how do we support our local farms, our small farmers, our small processors to have a bit of a leg up and to make a better, more just sustainable food system. So thinking about saving this farmland, but in addition, moving forward to create policies and programs that support a vibrant local food sector that really works for everybody and can feed everybody in our communities. So with that, I want to introduce a friend of ours, Councillor Mary Margaret McMahon, who is in Beaches East York, Ward 32, and we work together in quite a lot of different initiatives.
It's an honor to be here. Thank you very much for having me. And on behalf of the city, Mayor Rob Ford, my councillor colleagues, I'm thrilled to be here. I bring greetings from them to you for the great celebration tonight. I'm a big foodie myself. In my former life, I helped start a farmer's market in the East End, Eastland Park Farmer's Market. And I would usually be wearing my pea in a pod costume and chasing cars and shoppers down on the dance floor and trying to lure them in. So if you need to borrow any vegetable costumes, I have them. I'm not allowed to wear them right now, supposedly, but I might break that rule. At the city, we have done some great things food-wise this year. We passed the bake ovens, which I think is phenomenal to be, that we have that now set up, that policy. And also, unfortunately, hens did not happen. I took took a lot of heat for that, but I'm happy to bring that torch back later on. Hens will happen. They're just, we just need to get a lot more education out there to people about that, backyard hens. And actually, interestingly enough, I have a meeting tomorrow with park staff to talk about how to get the new Road TO report kind of watered or flushed out to tangible actions that we can do in our parks. So if you have any other foodie ideas that you'd like to bring, please let me know. Just look for my email on the City of Toronto website, and I'm happy to bring that forward. And we'll have to, the biggest thing is Sunday, big event in our ward, soupstock. Thrilled and honored that Michael Statlander and crew, everyone's bringing that event to our ward. And so please come out. Please do not drive. It is crazy congested down there. So tell everyone, don't drive. Swim, hike, bicycle, whatever you're doing, bring your own bowl and come on out for some fun. It's going to be great. Thanks.
We have Chef Michael Statlander, who's made some excellent soup and preview of soupstock for you a few minutes ago. And just to introduce Michael, he's of Einstein Farm since 2009 with his wife Nubuyo, who is here as well, serving with Haisai Restaurant and Bakery. And we're thrilled to have Michael, who is the president and founder of the Canadian Chefs Congress. You may know he has worked since coming to Canada in 1980 to elevate Canada's culinary scene and our food culture, to stand up for Canada's small growers, fishers, producers, and others. And most recently, Ambassador with Foodstock, which I enjoyed quite a bit. And Soupstock this weekend, as a political food organizer, I admire the ability to bring out tens of thousands of people for a food rally, which has never been done before in Canada. So, welcome, Michael.
Thank you very much. It's great to be here. It's a wonderful place, and I think it's going to be great for connecting people in the food world here. But just wanted to let you know that today, actually, as you know, is World Food Day, and one of the campaigns what the Canadian Chefs Congress took on this year, we're trying to let as many chefs know across Canada today to do a menu, what of course would have no GMOs in there. And also make people aware of the possible introduction of GMO alfalfa, what would be really like the end of organic livestock. And so you see a lot of things like this, a lot of people don't know, and maybe you heard about it, but about maybe 3 weeks ago it came out that the French government did an independent study on GMO corn. And they found out that the rats all were dying after not dying, but developed cancer after 120 days. And legally, Monsanto only has to keep the rats alive for 90. And the Russian government immediately stopped all imports of GMO corn. That's amazing. And the Canadian government is looking into it, so we'll see what's happening. So that was really like a really important thing for us to kind of, this is really like one of our next big campaigns for the Chefs Congress to educate people in the food world about what we can do about not using GMO foods. And I don't know if you maybe hear about Jeffrey Smith, who's like one of the hardcore people in the world fighting against GMO. He just has a beautiful movie out called GMO Roulette, and it's really worthwhile watching. It's very educational. So the other thing really, what's of course right now big time on my mind is soupstock, and my whole committee, we're really excited about it. We were shooting for 120 chefs, and right now it looks like we're almost close to 180. And we have chefs joining us from New Brunswick and Calgary, Buffalo, New York, and also home of the hedgehog Baupost from Boston. So it's really fantastic to get the chefs collaborators from the United States helping us in our fight against the mega quarry. And this is actually one really thing I think what's really beautiful about the Highlands Company. that they brought so many people together who really would otherwise never be working together and getting to know each other and making dreams and or dreaming up things about what the food culture really should and could be. So I'm very optimistic, and I'm really, at this point, really fired up about soupstock, and I hope you all can be there and tell your friends, and we'll see you on Sunday. Thank you very much.
Community food leaders from across Ontario, because October the 16th is what? It is World Food Day, and I've worked with the United Nations as an ambassador against hunger with their World Food Program, seen the plight around the world and the real conversations that need to be had about hunger. Here in Canada, access to healthy and affordable food remains a big issue, and it's a big issue that this country has yet to solve. Do you know that last year alone, Torontonians visited food banks 1 million times? 1 million times. And 50% still don't have access to a grocery store in their neighborhood. Think about that. That's an alarming number. Luckily, we've got advocates and organizations and businesses all working hard to make good food more accessible and to grow a movement for more local and sustainable food for all of us. So we just need to get together and work together in our communities, and not against, but with our businesses, and as importantly, if not more, work with governments to make a change. Many of you there right now are making a great difference, and I hope that more of you will be inspired to help after today. So thank you very much, and good luck today.
And it's a tradition to take a picture of the crowd and to thank Strombo for that message today. So I guess it's still fitting to say cheese since it's World Food Day. Do something crazy, put your arms in the air. Everybody say cheese. Okay, so the next portion of the evening is we're going to hear 5-minute talks from community leaders that we've invited today. We have 9 speakers, and they're only going to speak for 5 minutes. We'll keep track of time to make sure that you each get a preview on the many facets of the food community, from education to business, social enterprise, and community centers. So we've got our first of 9 folks. We've got a movie clip that we're going to show you. But when you listen to all the 9 speakers, if you've got ideas to share, if there's a burning issue that you want to discuss, we actually have 2 different sessions that you can choose from after the speakers. And that way you get a chance to learn more from these individual speakers, as well as share your ideas. And we're going to actually let you vote on one of the sessions that we're going to offer to make sure that we can capture some of the great ideas that are coming out from today. So I'll explain more about that later, but for that, we'll have Laura Rainsborough from Not Far From the Tree.
Not that tall. Thank you so much for having me, and happy World Food Day. It's a wonderful day to celebrate. Great, we have a day about food. Toronto is a city that is built on ravines. It's a fairly treacherous landscape to think about settling here, and yet we've been here for a long, long time. And the reason why we've settled here is because it is a rich and fertile place that can support life. The main rivers and the streams and the creeks throughout Toronto, including being right on Lake Ontario. And here we have salmon teeming through our rivers. There's an incredible abundance in our rich forests. Okay, so the picture I'm painting of Toronto is from a long, long time ago when we originally settled here. But today it might not appear as such a rich and fertile place. I dare propose that fruit trees are one example of the amazing abundance that can come from our fertile soil. So Not Far From the Tree, the project that I'm involved with, we harvest fruit from trees in the city and share it. So a homeowner will have a tree in their yard and they register it with us. We'll mobilize a team of volunteers to pick the fruit, and then everything is shared. A third to the owner, a third to the volunteers, and a third is delivered by bike to a food bank or shelter nearby. I've been amazed in discovering the abundance of fruit that's growing in our city. And after our first season, we were able to calculate that there's actually, guesses. how much fruit, people who are not involved with Not Far From Tree, how much fruit does the city of Toronto, like within city limits, how much do we produce every year by weight? By pounds? 30,000 pounds? 1 million. Any more? Guesses? It's 1.5 million pounds of fruit. So that's, oh Mark, you're cheating with Brian, that's nice. So that is actually the weight of about 10,000 average humans. So hanging from trees in city limits, it's a heck of a lot of fruit. And guess what? This is not a concerted effort. We didn't sit down and say, we're going to grow ourselves a whole lot of fruit. No, this is just what's already growing there. 80% of the GTA is classified as prime agricultural land. And we've paved over a heck of a lot of that. But it's amazing to see that within a tiny, within just a few square feet, that the trunk of a tree can emerge and produce hundreds of pounds of fruit. This is just one simple way that the amazing fertility of our soil comes into being, becomes activated, and that this is a potential food source for us. And so, in going into this discussion a little later, I want to posit that idea of what other potential is there in our soil, and how else can we bring it to life? So many of the people in this room are doing that already, and so it's a pleasure to share that challenge with you. I'm going to have to run out to a class. I can't actually stay for the discussions, but I want to introduce my colleague, Becky Thomas. Becky, give a little wave, as she will be representing Not Far From the Tree in the discussions. So thanks so much for allowing me to speak, and have a happy World Food Evening.
Okay, thank you. Okay, thank you everybody, and thank you for welcoming me. It's a pleasure to be here tonight. And I am representing the organization I work for, Evergreen, and the work we do with food. And we take an approach that's very much based on the stewardship of our land. We have been around for over 20 years, and our mission is inspiring action to green cities. And so we really approach the whole food spectrum from this ethic of care, stewardship for the land, and through that care for our communities. Increasingly, we're looking at how creating green cities has stronger economic links, and I think we all know how food has the tremendous potential to make our economy stronger. So, just backing up a little bit, one of our first projects that we worked with in Toronto was actually at Ossington Old Orchard Public School. And so a nice little segue there from Laura's presentation is that Ossington Old Orchard, which is at, obviously on Ossington, was an orchard back in the day. And so one of the projects we did 20 years ago was actually to replant an orchard at the school and to bring back that connection. So this work has been rooted in schools for many, many years. And in fact, I think we all know about kind of the school garden movements of Victory Gardens and before that. And so it's really interesting to see this resurgence. And with our work from a Pan-Canada perspective, about 10 years ago we noticed a great increase in the number of schools that wanted to grow food on their school grounds. And so this is World Food Day, and Toronto is such a great macrocosm for all this work. It's happening across Canada at such a grassroots level, with school after school and community after community wanting to take responsibility for transforming their local landscape. One of the exciting projects we did in Vancouver was actually creating a large-scale food garden right on the grounds of City Hall. So I think that those are sorts of powerful statements when you see how this work is transforming our public spaces and our political spaces too. Some of you might know Evergreen through our work with Evergreen Brickworks, which is the transformation of an old brickmaking site down in the Don Valley. And what we really wanted to do with the Brickworks is create a large-scale kind of center for exploring how nature makes our cities healthier. And so when we approached that, we looked at all the ways that we could create a model site as it related to many environmental issues, food being one of them. And we baked that into every aspect of the fiber of the space, and looking at how the model really is looking at how do we grow our food, how do we come together to prepare it, then break bread and share it together, and then take food action and ideas home back into the community. And so looking through the design lens with respect to green roofs, greenhouses, food growing, cooking classroom, compost systems, the water and irrigation comes from the water that's collected on the roofs and so on. And because creating a project like that has some scale, it's a way of one of our main reasons for doing that was how do we give this work a big push. So we're looking at sort of this pan-Canada approach, and community after community and school ground after school ground, and you're getting that wonderful ground-up kind of relentless incrementalism, but sometimes you need the big moves too. And so we're looking at how do we get this project how do we get this work at a much more sort of widespread, popular, conscious level. And so the Brickworks was one of our kind of a large-scale intervention to do that. And so, for example, now we run a farmer's market down there, which Marina manages and is doing a fabulous job. We have over 70 vendors at, and last year, this year, the direct economic impact of the farmer's market itself was $3.9 million injected back into the local food economy, and over 30 jobs created with the space. So those are some examples of how we're trying to give the work a big push. It's a broad spectrum. We're fully conscious of the complexities and the breadth of work, and we're aware that this is Evergreen is trying to play a key role and help move it along. We work in partnership with multiple agencies, with many levels of government, with the corporate sector, with farmers, with producers, with chefs. So it's really taking a collaborative approach and looking at the many, many ways that we can make a difference. So just maybe a quick snapshot. I used the stat from the farmers market. A couple of other examples just of trying to make an impact. Over almost 1,000 people this year involved in our kind of direct cooking programs, hands-on workshops, tasting, cooking, preparing, working directly with 12 gardens across the GTA, provided over $70,000 in grants to help communities across the GTA and some across Canada. And I guess I'll leave it at there, but maybe I'll just leave it actually with a wonderful quote from an author, Kirkpatrick Sales, and I talked about taking this environmental ethic approach, and the quote is that nature is not a place that you visit, nature is home. And I think the more we continue to understand our role as stewards of the landscape, the more we'll make it a nice home. Thank you.
Social media presence. So for folks that are tweeting and on Facebook tonight, we have a hashtag. We want to join the global celebrations for World Food Day, so please use WFD 2012, that's World Food Day 2012, WFD 2012. And to keep it local, we're using hashtag FoodTO, so if you could use that in your spaces.
You could also use @MContrero. Any other tweeting? I'm going to handhold it. Okay, so my restaurant's Cowbell Restaurant. Thank you very much. It's very flattering, Selena, for you to say it's the best, one of the best restaurants. I try to make it the best restaurant in the city. Okay, how do I cram 7 years of intense work in restaurant business in 5 minutes? It's really difficult, but I guess I'll start by sharing with you my focus. My focus is about sustainability. My concerns about the food systems that were happening 7 years ago were pretty intense. We had crazy things going on. Mad cow disease, spongiform, GMOs were coming into play. And I knew I sure as hell didn't want to eat them, and I didn't want to feed them to my children either. So I talked to a farmer. Brian wasn't the farmer that I talked to, but he's one of the few that I would talk to today. Okay, so how do I get this food to the city where people really weren't concentrating on meat proteins as being poor quality, or at least getting the best quality meats into the city? It just wasn't happening. Farmers weren't delivering in 2007 to the city. You can get frozen product, but fresh product for restaurant usage was really difficult. The other thing was farmers don't want to sell steaks. They want to sell cows, right? That's what they grow, cows. So I had to learn how to butcher, and that was a whole other thing to consider while working in a restaurant menu. I had to develop new systems, and restaurants are hard enough rather than reinventing an entire way to run a restaurant. I had to take apart a whole animal, and I also had to justify the costing and put it before a customer that made it palatable, using the whole of the animal and at a price point that was not invasive and not threatening in any way. So 6 years later, I'm here, still in existence. Although Cowbell hasn't financially made me millions of dollars, I still believe it's a success in many ways. We revitalized Parkdale, where I'm located. We were the first ones in the neighborhood, and there was a burnt-out shell of a building across the street from me, and now it's community housing. There's 7 other restaurants that have moved into the neighborhood, and I'm very proud, very, very proud to revitalize that part of the town. What else have we done? I think we've been tenement to the ideas of sustainability and educating our guests as to why I don't have a chicken breast on the menu every day, why I don't carry salmon steak, and why grass-fed, dry-aged beef is bar none the best you can get. And anyway, that's what I can do. 1 minute left I have over here. Well, I don't need 1 more minute. I'd just like to say thank you very much and enjoy World Food Day. And we'll go on to the next guest.
Nick Saul from Community Food Centers Canada, and many of you know him from his role as Executive Director of the stop.
Well, I like to hear that Glenn Murray is wishing us well. I wish he'd spend a bit more time thinking about social assistance rates in this province, to be honest with you. So I think on World Food Day, it's appropriate to think about food not as a commodity. I actually think of it as a public good. But for the purposes of tonight, let's think about it as an intimate commodity. I mean, if you think about food, if you share it with people, you build social connections, you can express your culture and your background through it. If we eat good food, we're healthy. If you grow it in a sustainable way without chemicals, you can nurture the earth. And most importantly, if everyone has access to good, healthy food in communities, you have safe and inclusive communities and fairer communities. I just want to speak very briefly about that latter point. I'm at Wilson and Dufferin, and I'm at a light. The guy approaches me with a sign that says, "I'm hungry, please help." And he peered into my car with an intensity that I can't really describe in words. It was palpable, his sense of desperation. And it's the same sense of desperation you're going to find when you look at someone waiting for a bus on Lawrence East trying to get to a crappy minimum wage job 2 hours away because they're concerned, A, about how inadequately they're paid and what they're going to eat when they get home with their kids. And it's the exact same look when a mom comes to one of our food programs, when I used to work at the stop, and you knew that she was giving up food so her kid could eat. So we have this level of desperation. I mean, I'm not talking internationally. We have 870 million people who go to bed hungry. I'm talking about in our own backyard. And I just want to quickly make the link between that kind of vulnerability and poverty in our city and poor health. If you were to take a map of the city and look at all our low-income communities, and by the way, the Vital Signs report is just out, by 2025, 60% of our neighborhoods in this city will be deemed low income. But if you take a map and you overlay low income neighborhoods with diet-related illness, obesity, cancer, heart disease, diabetes. Did I say that to start? You overlay that map, you find an exact correlation. So that crappy fat, sugar, and salt, that cheap food that poor people are forced to eat, whether it's at a food bank or at a gas station or at a variety store, is making them sick. Making them sick. We spend $12 billion a year in this country on diabetes. Diabetes affects poor people at twice the rate it affects healthy people. The Vital Signs report says that in the northwest and northeast of this city, 1 in 5 people have type 2 diabetes. So you got that going on, and then we have this good food revolution that's happening. The rich get local and organic, and the poor get diabetes. And what I like to spend my time on is trying to figure out how you make a binary force between local and sustainable and fair and justice, and making sure that everyone is at that good table. If we can agree that sustainable food is the best food for our planet and our bodies, then everyone needs to be eating it. So you've seen the explosion of farmers markets, CSAs, you go to 100-kilometer restaurants, they're all out there. But the problem with that movement, and something that I'm very concerned about, and it's easy to cast it as elitist, is everyone is voting with their wallet on that. Everyone is voting with their wallet. And we need to figure out a way to turn that vote with your fork, or viewing food as something that you as a consumer engage in, to thinking about it as food citizenship, that you are a citizen in your relationship to food. And what I mean by that is that we have to start linking our individual interest in food with public policy change. Like, you know what? How about a social assistance rate that doesn't give someone who goes to a food bank $5 a day to live on? How about a national housing program? How about a national school feeding program? I can go on and on. How about a nutrition card that every person on social assistance receives to get $100, and that nutrition card can be redeemed at a farmer's market? We have to find policies that link sustainability and local with equity and justice. And so to that end, I have no idea how much time I have. To that end, no one's come over here yet. Some of the work that I'm trying to do is build on what we've created at the stop. A bunch of stoppers in the stands today. And I've just moved to a new organization called Community Food Centers Canada. And our job is to try and create 15 community food centers across the country. Places where people can come together at farmers markets, in drop-ins, at food banks, and start to change the conversation about food in a respectful and dignified space that starts through an equity lens. And I'm hopeful that in 10, 15 years from now, we won't be talking about food banks. We'll be talking about community food centers. Thanks very much.
Brian Gilbasi, the co-chair of Sustain Ontario and also YU Ranch.
Thank you, Nick, for kicking my ass. I have a wonderful, this is my editorial comment, this doesn't count. I have a wonderful kinship with Nick, because as a farmer, I think if we're going to feed the people, we got to feed all the people. And we're working together on those kinds of issues. And that's a terrific place to be. So I'm here to talk to you about how change occurs. And by the way, the farmers can play a very important role in that, as we discussed. But I want to talk about how change occurs. I'm going to borrow from Harriet Friedman liberally here. I work in 3 streams. So I'm a co-chair of Sustain Ontario. I'm the eastern lead of a new emerging environmental program called Alternative Land Use Services. And of course, our home place is called the YU Range. So I'm going to talk about all the 3 streams, but first I'm going to talk about what happened last night. We started in the Local Food Act 3 years ago with some Metcalf papers that Lauren Baker and Sandy Houston from Metcalf advanced to the Ontario government. And that's where the first notion of this Local Food Act came into see the light of day. And we were this close to getting that legislation passed, and of course the prorogement and all that stuff will mean that likely is off the table for probably about a year. So our work appears to be for naught at the moment. However, I want you to understand that the local food movement, I believe, and all these things we work on together are just a campaign just like any other. And the Local Food Act was maybe the chance to hit a home run. But maybe we got to return to just thinking about ourselves as singles hitters, you know, one person at a time we need influence. On our place, we've discovered that we can repurpose it a little bit. We've become pretty good at making ecologically, sustainably raised food and all that stuff, and creating cleaner air and cleaner water and a greater environment from our land. We've also discovered we can repurpose it as a place for education. So we host a lot of tours, in particular with universities, colleges, places like that, MBAs, and Masters of Environmental Studies students that can come out where they can get their hands on and taste what sustainability looks like. It's a very important step because it's a nice way to reach people. Secondarily, we've been able to leverage that into some research opportunities that are happening on our place. So we've just got an ordinary farm out in southern Ontario, but by being creative and reaching out to people and opening our doors, we've got some very cool research that's occurring on our place. And some of that dovetails into our Alternative Land Use Services program, which is an incentive-based program designed to get farmers to provide more environmental benefits for the rest of us. And we now operate in 11 communities across Canada. It's a really cool program because what we thought was a pure environmental program to just get farmers to set aside some land for the birds and the bees has turned out to be a key component in turning them into sustainable farmers. And the way they get there is this. We're discovering that by having some natural spaces on the lands, that there's some benefits that flow to the farmers. And the touchstone for that has been the pollinators. And we've been able to stimulate some really cool research around pollinators. I can prove to you now that I have more pollinators on my farm than you do, because of the things we've done. And we will begin in about a year from now to prove that we can get you $78 more per acre of strawberries because you've set aside that land for pollinators. And that gets farmers' minds thinking about getting rid of the pesticides and fostering the bees and all that wonderful stuff. So it's become a really cool program, an entry-level program to get farmers involved in the environment that leads to a really great sustainable place. And finally, we try and merge that all together with Ravenna and Carolyn Young. I don't know if Carolyn Young is yet here from Sustain Ontario, on trying to drive some policy change at the provincial government level. And there's been a tremendous amount of meetings and papers written. Sustain represents 350 member organizations in our constellation. And we think we've been quite instrumental in at least getting this Local Food Act to where it was until about 8 o'clock last night. Now it appears that all bets are off, but the work will continue. The work will continue because we can still talk to bureaucrats, we can still talk to regulators, we can still talk to individuals, we can still be the change. And I would encourage you then from that example that it's not about hitting home runs, it's about reaching people, one person at a time, one bureaucrat at a time, one agency at a time. And that's how we can make the change. Thanks. For Sustain Ontario, you can get connected through Twitter and Facebook. There will be a Local Food Act writing campaign nonetheless. There will be a chicken campaign coming for backyard chickens. There will be the Farm to School Challenge. And of course, a year from now, the Bring Food Home Conference, which is occurring in Windsor, Ontario. So these are all under the Sustain Ontario banner. You can find them all on their website.
Up next is Asna Miranda Leal from Justicia for Migrant Workers.
Buenas noches. My name is Asna Miranda Leal, and I am an organizer for a group called Justice for Migrant Workers, or Justicia for Migrant Workers. I've been an organizer with Justicia for over 5 years now, and I guess I'll tell you a little bit about who we are. We're a completely volunteer-driven organization. We don't have any staff, and we're a political collective. And we work with migrant workers all across the province, and we also have a chapter in BC. So I want to give a shout out to Erika from Justicia BC, who's up there from the stop. So most of us have day jobs, some of us have day jobs, and evenings and weekends we do work with migrant workers. So when we started, I wasn't there, but when Justicia started about 11 years ago, the work involved mostly farm workers from Mexico and the Caribbean. As some of you may know, Canada has a binational agreement with Mexico, with Jamaica, and the Organization of Eastern Caribbean States. So that includes Trinidad, St. Lucia. Anyway, so we have farm workers since the 60s from Mexico and the Caribbean growing our food. So we like to come to these spaces and say, okay, what are we eating? How was it grown? But who grew it? And how did they work? How did they produce our food? And under what conditions? So I guess some of the issues that we see out there in the farms and the fields are related to employment standards. So we see widespread violations of employment standards. So technically, anyone who works in Canada is allowed to have the same protections and rights. Practically, not the case. So we see unpaid wages, we see breaches of contract, we see reprisals, meaning punishment for, well, for anything, just a punishment. We see human rights violations all the time. There's a lot of racism out there, there's a lot of sexism out there because there's men and women in these programs, right? So we see health and safety issues. Big problem is usually the first thing a migrant farm worker will talk to you about is they're concerned about their health. So out there in rural Ontario, we see people spraying pesticides with no training, no equipment. We see pesticides being sprayed on people while they're working in all these different crops. We see them working with machinery that's very dangerous. With no training, no equipment, or very little training, or training in a language that they don't speak, or it was given to them in a document, and not everyone can read as well. Not everyone can read English, for sure. So then we see problems with workers' compensation. Obviously, you usually don't get any of that. That's like, nobody's even heard of it. Usually it just gets at home. And that usually means you can't access healthcare for the problem that was caused here in Canada to grow your food, our food, right? We also see problems with housing. Employers have to provide housing for farm workers, and so you can imagine sometimes it's less than ideal. We've seen very substandard housing out there, and there's problems with recruitment fees. And recruitment agencies, there's a lot of extortion that's happening by agents and recruiters overseas. Also, it's important to mention that it's no longer Mexico and the Caribbean only. The programs have been extended by Immigration Canada to bring people from Thailand, from the Philippines, China, Colombia, Mexico, Honduras, El Salvador, you name it. Anywhere you can get someone to come and work, to do any type of work, including farm work and factory work. So other parts of the food chain. So what we do is we organize on many different levels around labor, around human rights. We provide some services that some of us have picked up along the way or in our day jobs, right? Some legal services. But what we're really into is organizing, right? We want to touch on structures and not just do case by case or problem person by person. So some words that haven't been mentioned today are race and gender and class, and that's a lot of our work is anti-racism. These programs are bringing a racialized labor force, and it's often very gendered as well, and so we try to fight that in many ways, and we've been involved in many campaigns or workplace organizing, and a lot of our work is coming to these spaces and creating alliances with folks. So I guess I'm probably out of time, so I just want to say that we can't ignore who grows our food, we can't ignore how it's grown, we can't assume that because we're in Canada people have the same rights. People do not have the same rights. They have very theoretical access to these rights, but in practice it doesn't happen. So we have to realize nobody's going to fix it unless we start talking about this and we start talking about these issues in every space, not just labor, not just immigration, but also food spaces, right? That's what I got tonight. Thanks.
The man you have to thank, if you're enjoying the food trucks all over Toronto right now, Suresh Das from Food Trucks Eats.
Hello everybody, I'm going to stand over here because I have a 20-minute slideshow that I have to go through, so bear with me. So I'm here to talk about street food. or more or less the food truck phenomenon. Street food has been around for a very, very long time on this planet. This is a photo from an event we hosted at Pelhar Estates Winery in Niagara back in May. And what you're seeing is essentially the largest food truck rally in Canada at the time. 16 food trucks offering a variety of different types of food at a beautiful winery. So that was back in May, and since then the record has been broken twice. But essentially what I wanted to talk about is not necessarily street food, but the food truck phenomenon. The food trucks that you've probably seen on each street and Food Network, and some of the ones that you see in Toronto today. So basically, these trucks that have been on for a long, long time, since the 1890s, serving varieties of different types of food. But in the last sort of 8 years, there's been a sort of resurgence in terms of the types of foods and the types of attitudes and personalities with these food trucks, and the type of things that we can find on them. In my opinion, this sort of modern-day gourmet food truck trend started in 2005, and it's basically started as a result of post-recession style eating. Basically, on one hand, you had chefs, or young cooks, chefs, that didn't have the amount of money to put into a new restaurant, to open a new restaurant, because of the economy. And on the other hand, you had diners that wanted restaurant-quality food, but they didn't want to spend that amount of money. And that's essentially that, on one end, with the industry not wanting to spend a lot of money, with the consumers not wanting to spend a lot of money, and technology, social media being sort of the backbone, connecting everything and everything, sort of restarted this food truck movement. So it's basically a convergence, in my opinion, of social media, millennials, young guys sort of wanting to do something different, the multicultural influence, obviously, with these cooks and chefs, and fresh ideas. How about, we take the idea of serving Latin American street food, and instead of opening a restaurant, we open a food truck and just roam around. And then next thing you know, you have all these food trucks that have popped up all over the world, not just in North America. When you look at the slow food trend, and you look at the molecular gastronomy trend, next to those two global trends, this trend has spread so quickly and so vastly across the globe. In the US right now, there are close to 4 million food trucks that are operating. I wanted to take you on a quick slideshow of all the food that I've eaten recently from food trucks in various cities. So, Satana Creek, London. London again, a kimchi sandwich, a cheeseburger in Paris, seafood paella in Madrid, hamon cheese sandwich in Barcelona last week, bacon creme brulee in Phoenix, tostones in Seattle, mole in Austin, sweet potato pies in San Francisco, po' boys in Portland, dumplings in New York, elotes in Houston, stews and injera in Madison, obviously the very popular puri carts in Mumbai, last week in Strasbourg, roasted chestnuts, in Calgary, obviously you have Ali Burger doing a lot of really good stuff with burgers from the food truck, Vancouver with rice balls, fried rice in Boston, stuffed pizza in Rome, chickpeas in Baltimore, taco platter in Berlin, samosas in Vancouver, and Miami. Miami's a pretty awesome city for street food. In Miami, you can have fried spring roll pancakes, you can move over and have some grilled cheese sandwiches, you can move over and have some sliders in the next truck, you can have a short rib and some cornbread, you can have some tacos, you can have some dumplings, you can have some soft shell crab buns, and then you can finish off with a beer, and you can move over to a cigar truck and have a cigar. It's pretty awesome. So, this slide sort of illustrates all the food that you can find in food trucks, from dumplings to fried octopus, to tacos, to pizza, to hot dogs. The cool thing about this slide is everything that you see on that slide came from a Toronto food truck. The problem is, though, is that there were not trucks that you're able to see freely roaming across the city. Sort of, they're from a Toronto food truck. They're from a Toronto food truck that operate out of private spaces, events and festivals. But when you walk, when you take a walk down Nathan Phillips Square, and you're looking for street food in Toronto, that's what you find. Okay, just hot dog and fries. And it's basically because we have some very draconian rules, just outdated rules in terms of what kind of street food's allowed, outdated rules in terms of entrepreneurship, with allowing new trucks to roam around. There are some myths and false perceptions in terms of whether street food is healthy. A lot of people don't think, oysters are healthy. A lot of people don't think ceviche is healthy. So what we do is we create events. We create events to sort of create, to build critical mass, if you will. to get people to see the food trucks in an event capacity. Therefore, it's technically legal. And we've been doing this since last year, and we've been doing it very successfully. Our first event was close to 4,000 people last July when we kicked it off with only 5 trucks. And the third Food Truck Eats event had 13 trucks with 20,000 people. And we continue to do these events from time to time. So there are some obvious benefits when it comes to these types of this type of eating, this industry of eating, if you will. Obviously, there's cultural diversity. Toronto being one of the most culturally diverse cities in the world, we should be able to sort of flaunt our feathers and show the kind of street food we can create. There's obviously a chance to animate dead zones. If you pick sort of parks and larger areas where there are no competing restaurants, you can put food trucks there to animate these zones. There's obviously the employment, right? You have a lot of young kids that come out of George Brown and other culinary schools that want to open a food truck and sort of test out their food concept and drive it around the city. Tourism, obviously. As I said before, besides the slow food movement and the molecular gastronomy movement, the food truck movement is one of those very, very few trends, if you will, that has spread so globally, so quickly, and so vastly. People travel to cities to go and eat at food trucks. And obviously, at the end of the day, it's about the food. It's about eating something culturally different from truck to truck and not spending that much money. That's all I have. Thank you.
Your exotic fruit that you love. And
Here we are.
maybe shout out for Young. What's your exotic anti-local food that's your sin fruit? Everybody shout it at the count of 3. 1, 2, 3.
Did you hear that? No.
Hey everybody, can you hear me?
Hey, let's give Young a round of applause for that beautiful clip. So we're actually the second group of folks to be able to see this preview. I was able to catch this at TIFF last week. And so Young, I guess the first question that I think I'm pretty curious about is what's your favorite fruit?
That's like asking what your favorite movie is, or who your favorite musician is. I think there's so many different fruits that are delicious. I think it all depends on where and when you eat that particular fruit. So I've never tasted such a good durian before as I did when I was in Bali. Freshly fallen durian fruit was delicious. I had something in Hawaii called a Burmese grape, which was unbelievable, like a little Jolly Rancher kind of marble. It was beautiful and burst in your mouth. Tasted like bubble gum or something. There's so much out there we don't even know about. It's unbelievable, and I hope that you got a little glimpse of it in the opening here. But I can tell you, I've tried a fruit called the ice cream bean, and it's literally like a velvet pea pod-sized fruit, and you have to unzip it, and inside is this fluffy cotton candy that tastes like vanilla maple syrup.
So my question was related to the shelf life of those fruits that you mentioned, and things that have a short shelf life, and what relative meaning that has towards.
Can you repeat the question for me?
I just. So I guess what fruits have you encountered that have a really short shelf life, and that maybe too far for it to get to even to the farmer's market, because once it's picked, it doesn't get to. It's not.
Yeah. Well, that's a good question, and that's something we explore in the Fruit Hunters. I mean, most of the best fruit and the most, is often seasonal and does have a very short shelf life. The fact that we're able to get certain fruits any time of the year is as a result of, highly bred and perfected fruit that is meant for long shelf life, like the Cavendish banana. But it's certainly a thing about the backyard. Something there's something elusive as well about fruit, and so I guess you could say it's almost it's such a fleeting kind of thing that makes it so enjoyable that you can only get certain things at a certain time of year. One concern of mine was when we were shooting in Borneo, how I wanted to get, I wanted to find a certain type of fruit, and I was worried that we wouldn't get there in time or at the right season. But I was reassured by Richard Campbell, the fruit hunter from Miami, that it doesn't matter. Whenever you go somewhere, you're going to find something. And I think that was very reassuring to me. And I think similarly, even in Canada, I think we can almost attest that in the summer, in those great seasons, we can get some amazing fruit and berries, and the peaches from Ontario are delicious. So it all depends on that timing.
Okay, and we've got another question from the audience, and then I think we'll let you just chat about when the film's coming out and where and all these things.
Sure.
Hi, my question was about the bean you're talking about, the vanilla bean. Does it also go by the name the Inca bean? Just curious.
The Inca bean. Great question. I'm not sure. I've known it only as the ice cream bean. Inca bean, I'm not sure. I have to do a little search on that one. There's the Inca bean. I know that I even tried carob, which is the... Hello? Hello? Okay. In the short of it, no, I don't know the similarity between Inca and the ice cream bean, but I will look into that. I have to say, I got deeply obsessed with fruit, and it went beyond filmmaking for me. It became almost an obsession to try to taste all the fruit of the world, and my producers had to put a stop to it. So the Inca bean fruit is now on my list. I will look for that. On my own time. I hope that it's great. First of all, I want to thank Lena and the organizers for having us speak and show a sneak peek at World Food Day. This is a food film, and if you love food, I think the fruit has its allure. We will be opening in theaters on November 23rd in Toronto at the Bloor Cinema. And in the lead up to it, I think I'll be doing a little press tour, and hopefully we'll get wind of it. But please join our Facebook page for updates, and hope to see you in person at the Bloor Cinema. Thank you so much. On November 23rd. Oh, great. He loves fruit.
Thank you.
So now for the fun part. We've been speaking to you for a couple of minutes now. We're actually going to have a break right after this, but before you leave, let's just, you'll notice that we've got our volunteers, Janelle and Catherine, handing you Post-it notes. So you've seen the 9 sessions. If there's a 10th session, the 9 speakers, sorry, if there's another topic that you feel like we've missed out of our speaker series here, if there's an idea that you want to share, then write it down on your Post-it notes, and then Janelle and Catherine will be at the door here collecting your votes, and we'll actually tabulate them, and then whoever gets the most votes will include a session in one of the workshops later tonight. So right now,
So my name is Carol Binster. I'm a food lawyer. I run my own practice where I help people try and navigate through the laws and regulations that govern food so they can execute their food ideas. And then I also work towards advocating for a more innovation-friendly sort of overall structure of food regulations in the province and the municipality.
How did you get involved in that way as well? Like, you're the only person that I know that's focused specifically on food law.
Well, really, it was born of a complete undying obsession with food and all things food related, and an attempt to try and merge that with the fact that I had gone to law school. So I thought I will just start identifying myself as a food lawyer. And sort of another sort of nexus point of the idea was I was working with the Toronto Underground Market with a woman named Priscilla Vilas who started something called the Toronto Underground Market, which is a social food market, we call it, for burgeoning food entrepreneurs to give their food a shake for the public to see if the stuff that they're making is good enough that people will buy it and potentially, start the foundation for their own food business. So I started to see this. I was working with Priscilla and helping her navigate to set up the structure so that public health was happy and the city was happy and we had all the right permits. And there were so many awesome vendors cooking delicious food that were chomping at the bit to try and start their own small food business. Or, be that a pop-up or a brick and mortar or a catering company or a non-profit, like a more community-based food source or food idea. And I just all of a sudden found myself surrounded with this community of people, and I realized that I had a skill that could be beneficial to the community and would also, make it so that I got to be around food all the time and people doing cool food things. So that was how it started. Yeah. And it's just over a year old, and it's just me in my dining room, so it's not an elaborate, structure at this point. But yeah, the other thing is I try to provide the legal services accessibly and affordably to try and sort of create greater access to justice so that people will either not do their food idea or they'll do it wrong or they'll, risk sort of investing something, be it time or money or whatever, and then get themselves caught somewhere down the line by something that they didn't see at the beginning. So try and sort of help people build sustainable food businesses. The other sort of mandate is that I work only with people that I believe are contributing to a more sustainable food system. And that's a pretty loose definition that I get to apply how I wish, but it usually means people that I believe are, contributing to the triple bottom line and a more sustainable food system in a general sense. Yeah.
I don't know why I was asked to talk about business. When I Selena's here. Well, I'll tell you why she asked me.
You want to hear the good and bad
because in building my restaurant, I kind of building it up. I hit every branch on the way down, and in doing so, I learned a lot of lessons, and continue to this day. Everybody, I know it's. Everybody knows that restaurant business is a very difficult business. They're not lying. It really is. There's not a day that goes by. My girlfriend Alexis will be testament to that there's something that happens, whether it's an ice machine failure or the city turning off the water for no reason whatsoever. There's always those kinds of battles that you kind of have to navigate and get through. So it's not just being passionate about the food that you make or the people that you want to work with or the kind of philosophy that you have. It's that drive that gets you through and gets you back to that restaurant day after day after day after day that keeps it going. And I guess if there's any questions, I think I'd be easier answering those than me just telling you my trials and tribulations. I guess
that would be very interesting.
Yes.
We'll talk a little bit about the consumer who finds you. Do they seek you out, or do they just happen upon it? The trend in terms of awareness.
That's a great question. I think when I first opened, Pavel kind of took Toronto by storm. We got a lot of media attention right off the bat, just because of our philosophy and what we were doing. Back in the day, again, 2007, words like sustainability, local bar weren't even coined yet. So when we opened our restaurant, what we wanted to do was we didn't have a definition for that kind of thing at that moment in time. So a lot of people were coming to try to see what that was all about. And then we also lost a lot of customers because people were trying to put us into some kind of framework conceptually of what my restaurant was. It was, first off, it definitely wasn't a atypical Toronto restaurant where you could have, since the 1980s, salmon steak, chicken breast, New York strip loin and a ribeye. You know, we didn't have any of those items on our menu. I would not serve them if you asked, just because we didn't have them and it didn't represent that framework of a sustainable farm network. So we lost a lot of customers right off the bat, like a lot of people that had that kind of really, that mindset. Well, why can't you defrost a chicken breast, or that kind of thing. And then from that point on, we were just educating our guests about why we are doing this and talk about the holistic practices that we take on, only because it's what our farmers are doing. We believe our food from the plate comes exactly from the same kind of care that the farmer that I know and trust puts into raising that animal. So I think intrinsically, the people that now visit the restaurant kind of seek out that flavor and those ideas, because in the end, that care translates into a different flavor than what we're typically used to when we eat, say, steak. I keep referring to beef, but I'm talking about all kinds of proteins, like whether it's pork or fish, the same kind of care that goes into our buying practices, translate into better flavor and products. And for me, my cooking style, like I'm a trained chef, more than a business person, but so for me, this whole philosophy translate or working around flavors exemplifies what I do and what I believe as a career choice. Like if I can put a dish together with as little manipulation as possible and have it taste spectacular and wow my guests, just cooking it properly and having it arrive to the table in a friendly, timely manner, and I win. Super win. Especially when I'm not covering it with all kinds of sauces to make it taste like something, because it doesn't taste like anything to me. So, yes, sir.
Did you have, or do you have any partners along the way other than obviously legal counsel, to help kind of establish and grow the business side of it? Or
that's a good question. No, I'm sole owner at this time. When I first started off, I was partnered with my ex-wife. That was for about 2 years, and then the partnership dissolved. And she was more administrative help, like office work, making sure bills were paid and things like that, which was helpful. Don't get me wrong, but there was no real push driving the restaurant forward.
How did you link up with farmers? How did you make those connections when you first started? For suppliers?
That's a good one too. I was nuts. I was like 28 years old. No, 37. 35 years old, and I had to figure out the sourcing, right? Because there was only 3 farmers markets at the time. One of them was at City Hall and was not organic market, so there was no proteins at that market. So my first onset, my first farmer happened to be my beef farmer that I found, and I was opening up the restaurant, and I knew I wanted to do all these things, and I needed to get this shit together. So I also knew I needed some equipment, so I went up to Brantford, and there was this guy who was selling off restaurant equipment that I needed, and me, big mouth and big ideas, buying this equipment from him, said, I need an organic farmer. You're in farmland. Do you know anybody? And I said, I don't know anybody, but you should try the bulk food store across the street. All right, so I go there, get the name of the farmer. Now, on my way back to the city, I call him up, and I said, my problem at the time, like I could find farmers dialing up and calling, but I couldn't find naturally raised beef farmer that would be able to supply me with dry aged beef. That's a big difference for me. Like I could have called Beretta Farms or any of the major large suppliers at the time of beef, but everything would come in and it would be wet aged, right? So there's a thing about dry aged and wet aged, and I'm just going to tell you about it. Wet age, the animal's butchered and then immediately backpacked and then put in a fridge somewhere. And the only age that happens is the passage of time. There's nothing affects the meat at all whatsoever. When you dry age, there's that passage of time, but there's that exposure to air, which is, and what happens in that case is just like cheese. Okay, you have things cellared, and the meats or cheeses will evaporate, reduce in volume by water, right? By like up to a third, depending on how long you age it, right? Also, so that means it's going to concentrate the flavors, right? Again, key point for me. Another thing that happens, grass-fed beef is on a field, it moves around, is walking and eating all day long, versus, conventional beef where it's standing shoulder to shoulder with other animals eating corn from a trough. Doesn't move around that much. So the muscles tend to work out. They can be a little bit chewier in texture. Big problem for me as a restaurant. You don't want to come across as the guy with chewy teeth ever. So dry aging also has enzyme breakdown of the meat. So that loosens it up, kind of tenderizing it. So that was my main problem. And talking on the phone on the way back from Brantford, I was talking to my farmer and I said, okay, can you provide me with grass-fed beef? Can you provide me with dry aging technique? He said yes to both of those questions. And I said, how do you want to sell it to me? And he goes, well, I'll do it for you, but you have to buy the whole thing. I'm like, whole cow? I've never seen a whole cow in my entire life. You're like, that's not true. I've seen it, but I've never worked with a whole cow my entire life, right? In a restaurant standpoint, right? So that got me really thinking about how the hell I'm going to do that in a restaurant context. So finding that farmer and that connection to the farmer really started how my restaurant fundamentally worked, right? Because not only working with the whole animal, but I had to forge a relationship with that farmer, essentially buying that cow outright before it was slaughtered, right? And then guaranteeing him 6 months, a month and a half from now, I'll take the rest of it, or the next cow, and the next, and the next, and the next, and the next. Effectively guaranteeing my supply. But, that ebbs and flows within week. There's, again, that idea of animal husbandry, that connection, that relationship that I have with that farmer is intrinsic. Yeah.
Harley, sorry.
No, yeah.
So you talked about your food lawyer, and that's very interesting. When you talk about helping folks navigate the various different protocols, red, etc., do you notice it more at the municipal level, provincial, federal? Like, what can you tell us more about that?
Definitely municipal and provincial.
Yeah.
Most of it federal.
Yeah.
Municipal, I do like a lot of work in street food.
Yeah.
So that's pretty. I mean, the Health Protection Promotion Act, which governs like food premises and where food can be cooked, and a lot of the sort of things that just about the actual production and sale of food are provincial. But then in terms of things like, Toronto Public Health, which enacts the provincial legislation, but it's also a municipal body. The permitting and the licensing is all municipal, so when you're looking at street food, particularly, that comes up a lot. Provincial, I once did a full scan, because the one thing that it's important to keep in mind is that I didn't go to school for food law, so nobody had sort of walked me through the broader food law structure, and it's very much still a work in progress, and I'm sure will continue to be so for the entire time I'm doing it. But I actually looked through the provincial legislation to see what acts, what provincial pieces of legislation actually impacted food production, food sale, what's in food, all sorts of things like that. And there are, I think, about 60 And it's everything from like the Bees Act. You know, there's like a 10-page act about bees, you know? It was mind-blowing to me that every single thing, they thought of everything.
And so you had to do that individually, right?
Well, yeah, and I am nowhere near through them all.
Yeah.
I'll tell you. But like, I just to sort of canvas for myself to see how it's set up in a big picture way. The thing federally that comes up, and this is coming up with a few new clients I have, is sort of figuring out the labeling, the ingredients, the packaging, and a lot of that stuff comes from the Canadian Food Inspection Agency. And trickles down from there. So I have been lately on the CFIA website a lot and calling them a lot, because I got to tell you, I went to school to learn how to understand what a piece of law means, and I can make no sense of some of this. So it strikes me as crazy that, you know, somebody who didn't spend, 4 years of their life trying to learn how to do this would ever understand it. Not that like my mind is somehow sharper than everybody else's, but like I didn't put a lot of time into trying to figure that stuff out. And just reading recently, what you have to, the packaging requirements was the thing that really stumped me, as I was like, and it won't stump me forever. But I'm meeting a lot of roadblocks because it just seems like a completely different language. So it's all levels. It's all levels. The thing with the municipal stuff is a lot of it is sort of like, I would call it like quasi-lobbying, like especially with the street food. Because I've been working with Darcy actually on something called the Toronto Street Food Project for the last, 8 months. And it's a lot of like showing up at meetings and just articulating the viewpoint of street food. One of the first things I did as a food lawyer was I represented a hot dog vendor who was being kicked off his property, or he had been denied the spot that he had applied for. And I remember going to City Hall and it was a deputation. Like, it's not like anybody can do it. And I went and did this deputation, and Councillor Regent asked me after I'd done my 5 minutes, and I referred to case law and stuff, and I was like, there's a duty of fairness that you have. You cannot just remove this man from his livelihood. And I did this whole thing, and I was really psyched about it, because it was my first, real put myself out there as a food lawyer. And I remember Councillor Regent was like, she stopped me at the end, she's like, sorry, so you're a lawyer? Like a real lawyer? And I was like, yeah, I'm a real lawyer. She's like, and you're here for the hot dog vendor? And I was like, yeah, I'm here for the hot dog vendor. But it was such a perfect example of, there aren't a lot of lawyers in play in some of these spheres, right? And therefore people don't have representation, or they don't even, a lot of it because they can't access it, it's too expensive. But yeah, I do spend a lot of time at City Hall. You can have your head up earlier, but I don't know if you...
Yeah, I'm just curious what the CFRA stands for.
The Canadian Food Inspection Agency.
Oh, okay.
I'm sorry,
I guess my question is, before someone coming to you, obviously with various legal issues regarding starting a restaurant or other businesses, food trucks, whatnot, do you have a recommendation of a good legal primer for somebody who's not a student of law to
No, I don't, but I'm working...
How to get things in the works, whether it's a brick and mortar thing or something smaller.
I'm working on a project right now called Demystifying Food Laws, which is with a woman named Regent and some folks from Sistine, Ontario, and someone from my Sustainable Canada, to develop a legal primer for people starting food businesses. Because somebody said it earlier, I can't remember who it was, but it's not just the woman from Justicia for migrant workers. It's all fine and good to sort of help somebody one-on-one and do it again and do it again and do it again. But really, the only kind of systems can become when it's easier for everyone to do it, and there are easily navigable paths for everybody to take. So there isn't one that exists now. There's lots of good resources that you can find if you dig around, but there's no sort of one holistic place to come. I want to start a bakery. I want to start a food bank. I want to sell food. I want to sell popsicles on the street. There should be, and it should be the government that does it, but they don't. So somebody else has to.
Is that something that you would maybe potentially do go to a small business agency or the government, whoever's starting a small business, and they direct you to the proper resources to adhere to code or
No, they don't.
that kind of thing?
Yeah,
How does that?
They don't refer you. They help you. I'm in a business program now, and they're helping program. It's an amazing program. They help you write your business plan, but it's not food focused. There's no one else in the program who's doing food business, and so I'm really trying to find other people who are doing this or who have just done it to get those, like, where do I get packaging from? Like, you shouldn't get your labels from that place. Like, how do I find a kitchen? And I just haven't talked to a million people, and I'm still not going to be able to.
This is just the food truck one? Yeah, they're great resources. That's the thing. It's just, but it's also like put them all in one place. Like I just want to, and also have success stories, right? Like show how people have gone about doing it and sort of what they figured out.
Or what are the models that exist, and how far can you deviate from them?
Yeah, like are there loopholes? Is there some sort of creative way you can set up your food business so that you can get around some of the things that are so difficult and time-consuming?
But you have to know what those things are.
You have to know
You know if you can go around them or not.
Yeah.
One interesting thing that I took on and found out that I was doing correctly was I've been working with a whole animal. I found that I needed to do things like charcuterie and cured meats and smoking and things like that. Now, I'm allowed to do that being a restaurateur because I'm municipally inspected by the City of Toronto. If I were a butcher shop, even just a mom-and-pop operation, I would have to cease and desist doing any kind of bacon, smoked hog, smoked bones, whatever that entails, any kind of curing, brining, smoking. It's illegal to do that if you're not federally inspected by a federal agency, which means that you have to be a big industry to do that. You have to be a multi-million-dollar factory with refrigerated flooring, insulated, refrigerated docking bays, an office for a health inspector, a phone for the health inspector, a fax machine for the health inspector, eye washing stations.
Distance away from each other.
Exactly, like multi-million-dollar operations, right? So effectively, what that kind of legislation does is removes the kind of artisanal meat production that we have been used to for the past 1,000 years. You know, like kielbasa on Roncesvalles. Yeah. It's no longer kielbasa from Roncesvalles anymore. It is now brought in from large industry.
As a restaurant, can you act as an intermediary, as a supplier to other people?
It's a gray area, and I don't know. I'd have to talk to Kelly that work.
Every situation is different, and has all kinds of nuances to it. But
as far as
there are some
I've
people
approached
that
it like no. Like people have asked me, and I've said no because I'd rather protect my interests. Myself.
From a legal perspective, as a small business owner, how do you view liability, food safety liability, given this landing from a large industry perspective right now? That individual restaurant is handling meat products and doing whole animal, and then from a legal perspective, how that small business owner would fare.
Okay, that's a great question. I hold it really high. I mean, like our sanitation practices are above and beyond what you normally do, I think, in a typical restaurant because we're handling meat like this. I also believe that the product that I'm getting in is coming from really good sources. So when we're doing ground beef, that day. It's chilled to this temperature and it's packaged that instant, right? Or things like that. There's a lot of control that we have versus, Axel will have 10,000 pieces of cattle, there's no accountability, there could be a finger in there, no one would know, right?
Well, and a lot of people that work at Axel Foods, I'm sure most of you, or some of you have read about this, there's a lot of migrant workers, there's a lot of seasonal workers whose jobs are who's staying in Canada is dependent upon their job, which does not put them in a position where they'd like to say, hey, this one looks dirty. They're just going to stay and keep going because their life is depending on this job. So all kinds of intertwined issues there.
Yeah.
But I mean, really good insurance is a great idea. But you have to be monitoring every step of that piece of beef, right? The whole chain.
We have a lot of documentation just for that accountability. We do things like daily refrigerator checks, and age testing, and things like that. Just just to be sure.
A lot of it has to do with like policies and training and like you're really reinforcing to all people that work in your restaurant, not just the people that are touching food, but the people that are serving food. And like a lot of it does have to do with just sort of paying attention to it as a leader in your restaurant, you know, and conveying that.
Luckily, for me, doing what we do attracts really good people too. We've always had a really good staff that's keen on learning and developing this idea. So we've never really had any kind of, although it's also a learning kitchen, I always had very key people that are paid to kind of watch the apprentices and things like that. And just ensure that they know that this is why you're doing these things. Yes.
So, I also work in the restaurant industry, and it's sort of kind of like you. We have like a boss that's really big on the taste as well. And I was wondering, do you think that the cause for your restaurant is just regulating all that? Like the factors that people who come back, like other than the taste, of course.
You know, that's fair. I think more than ever, I'm tending to believe that it's not, and that's only as of recent years. 2008, 2009 recession, 2010 kind of lingered on a bit, and I thought that things would start to pick up again with the belief of sustainability catching on, the local food movement and everything else. Unfortunately, I don't think it's that pressing an issue to people for it's not on the top of their list for food coming to a restaurant. But it doesn't matter. I've stopped really hammering that idea home. Right now, I'm focused when I talk to my guests, I talk to them about where this meat's coming or where this product's coming from and why it tastes so good. That's always going to be the best answer for people eating.
Which also includes school curriculum and gardening in community public spaces. So it struck me that that's really one broader conversation. So that's what we're here to do. I know that there's two evergreeners here who are far more entrenched in the programming than I am, and so I think we've got a lot of resources in the room. And so Marina, who runs lots of cooking workshops and the farmers market and is a chef herself, and Amy, who does a lot of the community development and social justice work, reaching out to broad and inclusive diversity programming. So we have Amy here as well. And obviously,
my name is Becky. I'm here representing Not Far From the Tree. So in a bit, I can go ahead and introduce our project. Some of you might. Has anyone heard of Not Far?
Before, sorry, and I just want. Are there other programmers in the room too? Because we probably have other. You are with. Wonderful, wonderful. So another excellent organization and lots of expertise in the room.
Seeds of Diversity.
Pardon me?
Oh, Seeds of Diversity.
Seeds of Diversity. UFT's agriculture program. So there are a lot of resources. Second Harvest. A lot of other programming organizations in the room. So again, if we can make this more of a conversation, and we'll let the questions and fall where they may. And sorry, but you were going to.
Oh yeah, I was just gonna, Becky from Not Far From the Tree. I was just gonna quickly introduce Not Far From the Tree. Laura kind of touched upon it, but basically we are Toronto's fruit harvesting project. So whenever a homeowner has trouble harvesting the bounty of fruit in their backyard, we mobilize volunteers in the community who harvest the fruit, and then the fruit is shared into thirds, a third to the volunteers that harvest it, a third to the homeowner, and a third to a local social service agency.
Are there any general questions that people might have about running programs or reaching audiences or making a difference in communities that people wanted to offer to get the conversation started?
How do we prevent what happened in Queen's Park from happening again?
Oh,
we don't want to go around planting food. It's getting obnoxious. We go around planting food, and then the next thing you know, the city's then taking it.
Are you referring to the Food Act and McGinty's program Parliament?
I'm not sure. Are politicians a way to deal with this?
So the community garden that was...
How can we mobilize our neighborhoods better than we're doing? There's not enough of an outcry from our neighbors for that wouldn't happen.
So this is about the community garden that was planted in Queen's Park, north of Wellesley, and then was removed by the city because it didn't have a permit. It was placed there with folks. Our movement is so diverse. So the folks from the Occupied Gardens that planted it did so in the idea that you should have a right to plant food, to grow food in public space. Also the permit systems, the parks is not always very supportive of food, although there's a process, but community food projects are often very slow, etc. So yeah, we do need people to communicate with their councillors to show that these issues are important.
That park also, or that garden also was meant as a demonstration garden to the provincial government that it's their job to support local agriculture.
Yeah, so it's making a statement beyond that, and how do we keep making those statements and keep telling our politicians through Sustain Ontario, through Food Forward, through these other type of movements, and getting to know how to just go and talk to your councillor, your MPP, because politicians have to listen, and these issues are really important for us. So if we're not talking to them, then they're not going to be paying attention. So if you haven't set up a meeting with your MPP or your councillor or your MP lately, go do it and tell them about what you want in your community and how to make it happen.
I think there's a huge part about public education in that too, because I think at first I thought you listed or something, but you actually meant to say politician, right? In terms of following the leader. So a huge part of why we do programming is to raise awareness and provide education so that communities can lead this work, and then the politicians will follow where the public is going, and so that education not only leads the politicians, but it creates that knowledge so that the work can continue beyond a particular project that may be running. Question? Go ahead.
So I'm a school teacher, and I've done a lot of informal outdoor ed stuff, and I think that I've had a lot of success in reaching children and connecting them with food when the experience can be visceral and immersive, and let them see the magic and the alchemy of growing and tasting food that you produce and all that. Unfortunately, most of our school year happens during the season that's not really the most beautiful and productive. So I was just wondering if anyone from any of the organizations or from the community has suggestions and ideas of how to give students that exciting and magical experience in the classroom during the winter.
And Kyla Dixon worked and
Kyla can give you a workshop on cold frames so that they can be harvesting kale at Christmas.
Window farms?
Like we did last year, there's absolutely no reason they can't be growing lettuce 12 months of the year here in Toronto.
You can definitely do all kinds of growing techniques like sprouting to get them excited and see the process of starting sprouts and then eating them and enjoying them. But I would also really encourage you to go and see in your neighborhood what is happening and engage with industry and invite them as chefs or do tours to local destinations like school visits to local destinations that are doing good stuff. So do your homework, who is doing sustainable good foods in your neighborhood. Get them sort of encourage field trips both with the school or with their family to do homework during the weekend. Go to this store and find 5 really good food items and then that use sort of those those inspirational moments outside and inside the classroom.
I'm just going to run over the other session. I wanted to share about a campaign called The Garden in Every School from Green Thumbs Growing Kids, an organization that's based in this area. They've worked on school gardens, similar to Evergreen, in a few elementary and high schools, mostly elementary schools. So they have a campaign that's launched a few months ago, political campaign to get a garden in every school. So they're working on this with school boards and with teachers and trying to get it something at a provincial level. So they were here before. I don't think they're still around, but you can let me know. We have a blog about that on our website as well, or look up Green Thumbs Growing Kids.
Yes, go ahead.
I would just suggest that one way to bring the cycle of food kind of full circle in a classroom setting would be to talk about issues of waste and composting projects, whether it be worm, vermicompost, or hot compost. Anything that can get kids to think through food past the plate, I think is really important as well for teachers to be talking about to school kids, to expose them really to the beauty of that process and the importance of it.
Another resource is on Evergreen's website. We have a teacher's corner where teachers share curriculum, because it takes this work often takes kind of the I almost call them the local heroes, or the unsung heroes. And you're often alone in trying to do this work and reaching sort of outside of the curriculum and so on. So one sort of it is a resource, but it was teacher-fed curriculum idea. So what are you doing? What are you doing? Can you share this idea with me? Can you share that idea with? So a while back we created a separate area on the website just to try to facilitate that conversation, because it was much too mammoth of a project for Evergreen to try to do all that curriculum alignment across the provinces. So looking at what are people actually doing and how's it working?
There's a TED, I don't remember what the man's name, but I saw a TED a couple of months ago from a teacher in the Bronx. And he has a fabulous growing program. Everybody said, it's stupid, you can't grow food in the city, that's ridiculous. And he's gone ballistic. It's just astronomical, the greatness that this guy has done in the Bronx.
I just wanted to mention money, actually. There's so many groups in the city that would love to do things but need money. And a couple of years ago, I was a communications director at Volunteer Toronto, which is the volunteer center of Toronto. Folks have heard of Volunteer Toronto? Just to raise a hands. So Volunteer Toronto has actually been around for, I think, close to 40 years now, and they're funded by 3 levels of government. And the really neat hidden gem that people don't know about is that there's so many companies across Canada, and lots of them are headquartered here in Toronto, that want to give money to fund nonprofit projects all over the city. And so there is actually the mothership of Volunteer Toronto, which is Volunteer Canada, and many of the national corporations have formed a corporate council, and they, as many as you know, lots of different companies are doing sort of traditional team building retreats with their folks that are really expensive, and in the end it hasn't really had much value, and they're doing the trust game, and employees aren't really appreciating that. And what they're finding is a lot of employees are actually saying, can we help a nonprofit or neighborhood? Can we do something that fits in with our company mandate, or can we just pick a cause that we can all chip in and volunteer at? And so these corporations have hundreds and thousands of dollars that they direct to Volunteer Canada, and then it's fed through the system of 200 volunteer centers across Canada. So when I was there, we actually had trouble trying to find a nonprofit to give the money to, because then corporate volunteering was still a new concept, and it's like, at Evergreen, can you handle 100 volunteers to build something for you, or have a computer workshop, or build a garden? And often the answer was, we haven't done that before, we're not sure, so no. So I've had like $40,000, and I was like, can you take it? Can you take it? But it's changed since then, and there's been a lot of improvement, so I'd highly recommend, if you're hooked up with a nonprofit organization, that they actually visit Volunteer Toronto's site, because there's a special section for corporate volunteering, and that's where nonprofits can actually list their wish lists. And there's no project, big or small, that someone isn't out there, they're willing to do it. And you'd be surprised at what kinds of things different corporations can do. We had CEOs from one of the pharmaceutical companies and another one from one of the big accounting firms actually say, oh, we really want to clean out a warehouse. And so they went and cleaned the Yonge Street Mission's warehouse. So a lot of the projects that are really getting a lot of interest in funding right now, and this is sort of in rough order, is projects for youth, projects for the environment, and projects around technology. So you can pretty much spin most projects around one of those three themes, and since we're talking about food, a lot of that can be around the environment, but highly recommend that your nonprofit organization puts up their wish list, because the corporations actually log into the site and say, here's what we want to fund. Okay, there's already a project that sounds interesting to us, and they'll connect directly and provide you the money. And it's literally hundreds of thousands of dollars. Sometimes for a day we've had $300,000 given to us. So I'd highly recommend that you do that. And the one thing, I guess I'll announce it as well in the main room, is are there any nonprofits here aside from folks in the non-profitable? Nonprofits. I'm non-profitable too. It's okay.
Charitable status, I think.
Yeah. But for all the different programs that you do, I wanted to be able to provide a sustainable discount, because everybody wants to be environmental, but you can't afford it. And so I found the same supplier that is the same arts, school, and office supplier that the province uses, and secured a 78% discount. That's like 88% for nonprofits. So sign up. We'll renew our contracts at the end of this year, so sign up now. It's free. If you go on Films and Move site, I'll talk more about this later on just to share it with folks, but I guess that's my free money talk.
Just a quick question around the Volunteer Toronto corporate engagement opportunity. Does your organization have to be a member of Volunteer Toronto, or can anybody access it?
Well, during my time there, it was free, but I think it's changed since I've left. So I think that they still have a sliding scale depending on your organization's budget. Again, highly recommend. And even create a relationship with your volunteer center. Just call them up and let them know that you're a nonprofit looking for funds, because then you're top of mind. Because when the money comes in, and it's sometimes, there's a spectrum of corporations that are wanting to give money. Sometimes it's 5 employees in a corporation, and they think, we've never done this before, what can we do? And they'll call the volunteer center and say, oh, what are the projects I've heard of recently? And so it's good to keep top of mind that way. And then there's the other side of the spectrum as well, where corporations are really good at it, and the employees have really embraced volunteer programs where they say, we've got $200,000 and we want to build something, grow something on October 15th, and here's our money if you can help us with that. So as long as you provide your wish list, then they'll know it's available.
Maybe we could just shift a little bit to talk about engagement strategies, because that is always it can be a challenge, particularly sustaining engagement over the long term. And these projects, we have to be in it for the long term. So I'm actually going to put my colleague Amy on the spot right now, and just to share a little bit about the work that you're doing in communities across Toronto to get ways that we're engaging, particularly youth, and as I mentioned, some diverse communities, and some of our outreach strategies.
Okay. I do oversee a variety of community development initiatives, and it just so happens that one of the main avenues that we've pursued with communities is food itself, because it actually speaks to so many diverse communities, and it provides sort of an element of relevance to almost every community. And so I guess in terms of outreach strategies, well, first to describe some of the programs that we do a lot of community food gardening, and which extends into a lot of kitchen programs and things like that through the various centers. And so a lot of the ways that we do outreach is through collaborative partnerships. And so a lot of the times we're reaching out to social service agencies to build on or leverage their audiences. And so working with organizations and communities that are actually situated in neighborhoods and have access to the various assets and needs of those communities themselves, and working with those communities to be able to sort of leverage those assets and then build community food projects around what the needs and the desires of those communities are. One thing I would say is that we've learned it's absolutely critical to be in the communities themselves and to sort of get that critical feedback as to what is it that your community needs, how is it that we can sort of serve your community better, and sort of really ask the right questions to be able to provide the types of services, projects that really speak to what those communities are looking for and where they are at that time. So yeah, does any? Yes.
I'm wondering if there have been any specific experiences that you could talk about in reference to multilingual communities and the challenges around that. I know that, just for reference, I'm working on a community garden project right now at Jones and Queen, Leslie Brook Park, and there are many languages spoken in that community, and the community consultation process is something that we're finding very challenging because time pressures and whatnot as well, but trying to do a complete, a really concerted effort while not having the resources really to engage entirely.
Yeah, so it can be really tough, and you're speaking to the community consultation process, which is particularly tough when you're dealing with multilingual communities. I mean, one of the ways that I have, we found most recently that is successful is to look to the community. I mean, this is a very short answer for volunteer interpreters to be able to help you facilitate a discussion. And translate exactly what it is that you're trying to say. So really looking to the community to be able to provide that support. I would say that really, even though those barriers are there, the language barriers are there, making sure that all those people are still at the table, just that sense of being there, everything that exists beyond language is still really valuable for gaining participant ownership and buy-in. And so I wouldn't underestimate the power of bringing those people together. Oftentimes, I would say that the space and the environment that you're able to create, so when you have those community consultations, do it with food, do it with, do it in a way, make sure your icebreaker is one that includes nonverbal cues as well as verbal cues. There are all these little intricacies that you can do to help facilitate a conversation with diverse audiences. And I would say it's as much about the facilitation and delivery of that specific meeting than the content. Because the content is almost secondary. It's the feeling that people have when they enter a space and when they feel that sense of belonging in terms of engaging in a participatory process. So I would say that is first and foremost what the attempt should be. And then secondary, can you get volunteer interpreters? Can you get people from the community who are willing to help in those various ways? And I mean, I would say it's even as intricate as making sure the food that you're serving at that meeting is relative and representative of the communities that you're hoping to serve. So that speaks a lot to doing the homework, like what communities are going to show up. What communities are you serving, and then making sure that all the sort of bases are covered to serve those diverse communities.
I just wanted to mention as well, another shameless plug for Volunteer Toronto, but they actually have a training program around volunteering and working with diverse communities, and really anything having to do with the volunteer sector. They have a lot of free training and some paid sessions as well. They have about 4 different, every week there's something that they're hosting.
I just want to mention to what you were asking about. I'd just like to suggest also that you invite people to bring their kids, because their kids are going to be speaking English and their parents' language, and they're great interpreters. And they like to eat.
Yeah, sure. I did meet with my councillors, Raymond Cho and Radhika Sebaiden yesterday at the Civic Center. And just the question was about the barriers to getting started. In my talks with them, they were really supportive of really excited of what they had been starting their communities with community gardens, and with things happening at the Rouge National Park, and even guerrilla gardening under hydro wire. So, and we were talking about because all of us are here, caring about food and caring about kids. That how do we, I didn't know. I was just wondering if there's any resistance upon that perspective of how there's some reasons why they don't want to have gardens on, Queen's Park as an eyesore, maybe, or just because it's like because it's
People have put gardens in their front yard and had their neighbors go, "You can't go here; it's there." That's ridiculous.
So I guess the point is being like there's the actual resistance and the actually was there any experience of them not being open to the idea of using school land for setting up a learning garden and also a community garden?
I would say I haven't experienced that kind of resistance, but I have many colleagues who have, and I know there's an organization in the city that tried to set up an urban orchard in North York, and there was huge community resistance from everywhere from, the fruit's going to stain the sidewalk to it's going to increase crime because it's going to provide trees that people are going to hide under, like absurd. And I think it's just a lesson in, we're creating dialogue, and there are many people at the table, and there's always going to be, no matter what level, whether you're community or up here dealing with corporations and government, and, we have to find a way to have a conversation that allows everyone to sit at that table and be represented and to have their voices. And so I think, at this level, it speaks to a participatory process where there's a platform for people to sort of bring their concerns to the table, but then also making sure we not retaliate, but are equipped with the proper responses, education, awareness, to be able to move the process forward, but still allow that platform to happen. And I think it just speaks to this broadened notion of increased awareness and education within communities and across the board about these issues.
Yes, and I would also add that with respect to the local politicians, it's often about making them look good too. So you have to pitch these things in a way that are win-win. And so we've got many pictures of politicians in there for the moment, right? And so they need that. So you have to make this a win for them, and you have to make it a win for their constituents, which speaks to the education and awareness. And it's also so much about the community support. And so we don't go into any community and just sort of say, here it is. We have we get those letters of support from every kind of little dog and pony kind of show around. You show that there's that basic community support, which will make the politician look good, and start small. I think is, particularly if it's a more contentious issue or project, start small and show that you have a plan for stewardship, because a lot of times city staff in particular are worried that these projects will start and then the groups go away because they're small and grassroots, and then the city is left kind of holding the, what do I do with this? And now I'm the bad guy because I have to plow it over, or, how do I keep it going? So I think a kind of an incremental community-based approach will help to get the support over time.
For us as two communities, to keep in touch and to have partnerships, to have that continuity of whatever we decide to work on.
And people probably know about the Toronto Community Garden Network. There's actually agencies that are set up to help facilitate and provide capacity and keep the conversations going. And
I understand why culture students in the club was stopped, and that was the biggest problem. We didn't have enough facilitators. And, the city was wanting to give us land, but it was just like that. There was, not enough facilitators. So we had two community gardens. So I'm just seeing that gap.
try to keep the dialogue moving between events like this, for example. Any other questions? 9 o'clock at night? 5 after 9? I think people have given it the college effort, so thank you very much.
All right. So that's our last session of the evening. Darcy, did you want to mention the food training programs?
Sure. One thing Food Forward is doing because we all need more jobs in this sector is we'll be running a couple of basic food business training sessions for new entrepreneurs, which I'm open to get help with anybody that's interested. In November, December, we've run a couple of these in the past. A couple of years ago, they were quite popular. So if you're interested, send me an email. Darcy@pushfoodforward.com, and we'll try to expand the program. We raised a bit of money through this event to hopefully do another session probably early next year. So if you're interested in expanding these sessions, you can feel free to donate to this program today or through our website, pushfoodforward.com.
And I got a couple of questions on what Films That Move actually does. So it's these are sort of cross-sector community events that I do when I'm in town, and the focus is to get a really diverse group of people, including government, business, funders, and volunteers together to address social issues. So we pick an issue, oftentimes the community will let us know what's on their minds, and then we host an event similar to this to get people to not only learn more about the topics, but to meet each other and then actually do things. So following the event, we'll send you an email probably over the weekend with all the resources that you heard about today. And that way you can get involved and learn more and do more. And the other thing I wanted to mention is, are there any nonprofits here? Okay, I mentioned at the earlier session, but at Films That Move site, there's a 78% discount for all registered nonprofits in Ontario. That's like an 80% discount on art, school, office supplies. They do everyday things, even coffee and everything really that you would use to run the day-to-day operations of your organization. You just have to go on Films That Move site. It's a free sign-up. It's with Lyrico, which is the same supplier that the provincial government uses, and it's the same discount they actually get as well. And the reason I signed up with them is that they have over 800 green items on the catalog. So a lot of the everyday things that you use, you can get, and then it's green, and it's also 80% off. So you can take advantage of that.